is up, everybody? Happy Thursday morning. Welcome into another episode of the Rubber Match. Excited for you to be joining us. It is a great time of year. It is officially the regional weekend. Arkansas gets the number 3 seed. They'll host the Fayetteville Regional. If you followed our coverage all week, you know we've broken this down plenty, but here on the Rubber Match, you know what we do. We always do this. We're talking about baseball. Former Arkansas Razorback Matt Goodheart is going to join the show in just a little bit, but first, as we always do, we've got our housekeeping. SEC tournament is over. Regular season is over. It is time for postseason baseball. But first, I want to go on a little Brie Ellis tangent because this is a baseball and softball show, and I'll start with softball really quickly. I want to say this. The season that we saw from Brie Ellis is one that I don't think anybody has ever seen and anybody is going to see in Fayetteville again. She had 26 home runs on the season, a fantastic year. Yes, it ended in disappointment. Yes, they could have won that game 3, but the bats went quiet. Say what you want about anything about Brie Ellis and the season that she had and the end of the Arkansas softball season, but that can't take away at what a phenomenal season that Arkansas softball had and that Brie Ellis had. Just a lot of fun. Every college, postseason player of the year award that she's picking up is 1,000% deserved. Nobody deserves it more than she does. It's been a blast to see her, not only, I think, just interact with teammates and the media, but really to see after practice and after the games her interact with the fans and the level of just care that she's given to the university and to Arkansas and to the fan base is something that's really awesome and really special that you don't necessarily see every so often. So just wanted to start with that kind of conclusion, wrapping up Arkansas softball and their series. And now we shift gears and we talk about baseball. The Razorbacks going to host the Fayetteville Regional. Kansas, Creighton, and North Dakota State are the 3 teams coming to town. Arkansas, the 1, Kansas, the 2, Creighton, the 3, North Dakota State, the 4th. Arkansas will open up with North Dakota State. So let's get into it. Let's do our housekeeping. Then I'll talk a little bit about the bracket and my thoughts on it. Then we'll pull up much later in the show the full bracket, and I'll give you my national champion because I'm definitely going to be right. Don't quote me on that. So as we always do, we'll start with our Eloy Dinger count. This did not change from last week. Only one game in the SEC tournament. The Hogs lost to Ole Miss 5-2 in the SEC quarterfinal. So here's where we're at Dinger-wise. It is still 31 for Vahiva and Cahillo. Vahiva, as you guys probably already know, has plenty more accolades that he has gotten. SEC Player of the Year. I can go on and on and on. We broke all that down. Go watch that last week with John Williams, the PA announcer at Paul Walker Stadium. But here's where we are, 31 dingers for the Eloy brothers. As for our Gabe Gackle K count, it is up to 69, 4 strikeouts last week in a 3-inning outing for Gackle against Ole Miss. The pitch count got a little bit high, but you don't worry about that. He pretty much did his job, got up a little too many 3-2 counts, but again, you don't worry about that. It's just an outing to see where he is as we now head into this weekend. So Gackle, good trends for him, good trends for Eloy, the pitching staff. Outside of really that first inning that was spurred by a couple of errors early on, Zach Root settled in nicely. Cole Gibbler had a really nice outing, which I think Hog fans should not pass that over. Gibbler, I cannot wait to watch him in the postseason. I think he takes yet another step that we've kind of seen him on that trajectory of getting better and better. And then Christian Fouch able to get the one batter he faced. So overall, really positives from the Arkansas pitching staff in the game loss against Ole Miss. Obviously, you'd like to see the offense do a little bit more, but Matt and I will break all that down in just a little bit. So let's go to our field view of what I think the infield and the outfield is going to look like in game 1. And look, there's not going to be a change. This is it. I think this is set. Justin Thomas Jr. in center, Logan Maxwell going to be in right, Charles Davalon in left field. If you want more on Charles Davalon, our Big Trail Nation piece on Chuck is airing tonight in our PTN postseason special on KNWA and KARK at 6:30 p.m. So please tune into that. I'll be live at Paul Walker Stadium in that show and throughout the day giving you live reports on Arkansas's media and practice day, as well as reporting on all the other teams. So it's going to be a really fun day today. So I highly suggest you tune in. Just a heads up to everybody, I am recording this on Wednesday afternoon. This is recorded Wednesday. It'll be out on Thursday. Infield, Reese Robinette, Cam Kojal, Vahiva, Eloy, Brent Iredale, no change there. Cahillo at DH, Zach Root probably on the mound. DVH said that he wasn't announcing a starter yet. We will probably find out that starter later today. But we're just going to go on a limb and just say it's Zach Root because it always is Zach Root in this graphic, and Ryder Helfrich, as always, behind the plate. So a couple of things that I want to touch on some of these other teams really fast is that Arkansas's first opponent, North Dakota State, losing record. They won their conference tournament. They squeaked in. This was a team that almost lost to an exhibition game to a club team in Fargo, North Dakota. Do I think it's going to be a close game? Yes. Look, this is a team, they took LSU down to the wire. It was like 11-9 a couple of months ago in Baton Rouge, so they know how to play in hostile environments. So I wouldn't sleep on this team, but expect it to be kind of maybe like a SEMO game last year in the opening round for the Razorbacks, where they had to score 19 to 20 runs to get the win. So that's number one. Number two, UConn, let's talk about it. UConn did not get in. They lost to Creighton in the Big East Championship. UConn got a little bit snubbed, is what I've been seeing everybody saying, but I'm staying out of it. So Creighton comes here because they beat UConn in the Big East Championship game. They are the 3. Kansas is the 2. Kansas is a very hot team. There's no saying that they are not, but Kansas did lose in the Big 12 semifinals to TCU. They got run ruled. It was 11-1. They just did not look at it in any facet. So I think the Razorbacks are set up with a really solid regional. There's no scorching hot team coming into Fayetteville this year. I think the biggest team you got to worry about is Creighton, in my opinion, because they did win the Big East, so they're coming in with some positive, but they had to play a lot of games in the Big East tournament and didn't have a lot of rest. Again, it's the rest versus rust debate, right? Would you rather be rested? Would you rather be ready to go and play more recent? You could say whatever you want, but Arkansas is going to come in rested. The last time they were rested, they brought out the brooms and swept number 1 Texas at home to begin the last 3 series of the regular season. So we know how this Hogs team does when they have a chance to regroup, and we're going to assume they're going to do it again this weekend. But I'll give you my bracket predictions. We'll look at the bracket in some of my favorite regions. That's coming up. But for now, let's send things to break. After break, Matt Goodheart, former Razorback, going to join the show. Excited for y'all to see it. Stick around. We'll be right back. Welcome back into the rubber match. Excited to have former Arkansas baseball player Matt Goodheart joining the show. Matt, thanks for being here. Thanks for taking some time. How you doing?
I'm doing great. I appreciate you having me on. I always take up the opportunity to talk baseball when I can.
Yeah, and we love bringing on, former players, people with an outside perspective of this team. And for you, Matt, you've been here. We'll talk about that in a minute. But just curious, let everyone know at home what you've been up to. What are you doing right now? What's the latest going on with Matt Goodheart?
Yeah, currently hanging out in the office a lot right now. I just finished up my 2nd season coaching as an assistant coach at Southern Arkansas University Tech, and doing a lot of private coaching as well and strength conditioning stuff. And it's been good. It's been fun. And now I'm just kind of ridden to the administration side of things for a little bit.
Well, that is awesome. So let's have some fun. We're going to talk Arkansas baseball. Curious, how much of this team have you been following along with this year from a little bit of afar? What's it been like being able to watch this team from an outside perspective?
Yeah, quite a bit actually. I don't always get to sit and watch every pitch of every game, but I shout out to I think it's Stu Hogg on YouTube. He always
Yeah.
posts the recaps and the pressers that Coach Van Horn does, and I really enjoy watching those. And I do a pretty good job keeping up. But again, I don't get to see every single detail, but I really enjoy keeping up with my alma mater and the folks up there in Fayetteville that really changed my life for the better.
So let's dive into it, right? Because, and we don't have to go overly in depth because we'll go more in depth when it comes to your experience playing in postseason and in regionals. But I'm curious, what surprised you? What has really stuck out about this 2025 Arkansas baseball team to you and maybe some other people on the outside?
Yeah, what's really stuck out to me is what I think has probably stuck out to the majority of the viewers is just how dynamic this offense is. Um, you know, I think the defense is kind of a mainstay for the Hogs, but man, I mean, you go and look at their numbers. They've got 7 out of their starting 9 hitting over 300 with, I mean, more extra base hits than what you would think offhand. There's more than you would imagine, and it's they're really explosive and they can put a lot on you in a really short amount of time. And I think what we saw earlier in the year with how explosive they were, I think that could resurface at any given time.
And especially when you look, right, they were explosive early on, but SEC play, and yeah, it started with some lower level opponents, but for you who's kind of gone through that gauntlet, does that help you get momentum as you go towards the back half of the season, being like, hey, we can click at any single time? And it's kind of what we've seen this year in Fayetteville, where they weren't clicking during that 3 series losing streak. Then all of a sudden you come home, Texas, you get some rest, and this offense has been pretty much back to where they should have almost won the last 3 series, and they won 2 of the 3.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the good things about going into the postseason, the regional. The SEC regular season is a gauntlet, as you described. You're not going to go and face other teams and other conferences that are leaps and bounds better than what you've already seen. And then being able to host is just a huge advantage, and being a being an outside opponent showing up to Bomb Walker and what the fans provide, given that context, is just sometimes it can be overwhelming, and I think a lot of people tend to overlook that.
Yeah, I think my first time I went to Baum Walker Stadium and saw the atmosphere, being someone who didn't grow up a Razorback fan, it's like, holy crap, this is A, this is awesome, and B, what are they doing? What is this hog call? I am terrified. So I think it's a mix of both, but we'll get into all of that. Curious for you, you played infield, seeing Vahiva Aloy do what he's been doing. What's impressed you about him and just, going on that trajectory of being another great Arkansas infielder?
Yeah, it's really just fun to watch is the best way that I can describe it. Of course, I don't know him personally. He doesn't know me personally, but I mean, and not just him. There's so many good pieces of the team that's just super fun to watch. And congratulations to him being the SEC Player of the Year and all that. And like I said, it's really impressive. He does every part of the game too. It's not like me where I had a hole in my defense and things like that. I mean, he's good on all sides of it, and the sides of it that you don't think about him being really good at. I mean, he can show it off when he needs to.
There
The
was
speed at.
Yeah, there was one play where he's in the 6-hole backhand, makes his Derek Jeter throw, and I'm just like, wow, like that is insane to see his progression. So let's talk about postseason because that's why we've got you on here. You already touched on it a little bit a couple of seconds ago, but I've got to ask you about the atmosphere of playing for the postseason. How do you, as somebody who's played in the SEC tournament, had success there, how do you make that transition to now focusing on a regional, because it's a different format? It was the same back when you were there, the double elimination, but how do you go from the SEC tournament to the NCAA tournament? What's it like in the locker room?
Yeah, that's kind of going different directions. In the locker room, it stays relatively stays relatively, I guess, even keel in the locker room, because you show up and compete every day with guys that are obviously your friends, but they're they wouldn't be there if they didn't have this mentality of this business like mentality where, hey, it's great, let's show up and have fun, but at the same time, every single guy there is there for each other, and they're ready to compete as much as they possibly can and give 100% on in every aspect. And talking about the shift in environment, you kind of have to take each one individually. They all have kind of a life of their own, so just taking it one day at a time. Don't let the moment get too big, and going out and doing what you're capable of doing and everything that you prepared for.
I'm curious for you, do you have like a moment where you're like, oh, welcome to NCAA postseason moment? What was that kind of like for you?
Hmm. Let's see. That's a tough one. I really remember. I really remember whenever we played TCU in the regional in 2019, and then of course, just I think the atmosphere was the absolute craziest whenever we were in the supers against Ole Miss. That's the first time I really acknowledged how insane it was. And then just being at I guess it was Charles Schwab now, and um, that once we got there, it was just a next level and something that I've never experienced since, and probably won't ever experience again. It's a completely unique thing.
So it feels like Coach Van Horn always has these teams that are always really good. For you, like what has to click in the postseason? Like for this Arkansas team, what is it that has to all come together? Is it a little bit of luck, or can you attribute it to obviously you've got to be playing good baseball? But like, what has to click on the inside for you to make a run to Omaha?
Yeah, as much as we don't like to admit it, I do think there is an element of luck involved. Um, I think back on, everyone hates it whenever it gets brought up, but the NC State team of 2021, they got hot at the right time. If you go back and look, I want to say they started off the year like 5-10 or
Hmm.
something like that. Just had a relatively okay record halfway through the year, and then caught fire there at the end. But if you really think back, if the COVID thing hadn't happened the way that it had, then I genuinely think they were going to win the World Series that year. And it's interesting because I mean they had a talented team and the record didn't reflect it. and even as good as Arkansas's record is this year, I still don't think it reflects how talented they truly are. They're just top to bottom, left and right. It's incredible how talented they are this year, and I think even now it still gets overlooked in a lot of people's perspective.
Yeah, and especially again, you've talked about defense. Like, there's no question that this is one of the most complete teams. I think 3 of the 8 D1 baseball writers take Arkansas to go the whole way. They take him as their national champ. They've always been favorited this last year, but Coach Van Horn and the guys haven't really been able to get over the hump to Omaha since 2022. Do you think, do you always use it? And I know that, Coach Van Horn and players just say, no, we don't have last year in our mind, but do you think maybe that's the case? Did you, at least when you were playing, take previous learning experiences into new seasons and new postseasons of things that you learned last year that in 2018, 2019 that you could use in 2021 or 2020, whatever it is?
Yeah, sure. I mean, they say you learn more from your losses. You don't really go into it though. At the same time, thinking, you have this monkey on your back about getting further than you were the previous year. A lot like with the change in environment and where you're playing. It takes on it's an individual context and it takes on a life of its own, and you have to kind of treat it as such. And I think you know I think this team has I think they have the potential to do that.
What is going to be key for this team to do that? Like, if they want to get to Omaha, what's got to be at its best right now for this team?
Yeah, I think there's no such thing as a team that has an offense that always has a good day. So, I think the bats are going to be consistent enough to keep them in games. I think typically you hear it the other way around in baseball. The pitching keeps you in a game. You're just going to have to outscore the other opponent. I think Arkansas's offense is so good this year that that's going to keep them in games. And I think the pitching staff is going to have to do a really good job of limiting the runs so that whenever the offense isn't firing on all cylinders, that they can still outscore the opponent.
Yeah, it's an Arkansas offense that's averaged, if you look non-conference play, I believe 9.3 runs per game. And then when conference play started, so add that in, it's somewhere around 8.8 runs per game. So the offenses get going. Do you have maybe a pitcher or a player on either side that you're kind of looking at for Arkansas to be that kind of postseason guy and that postseason leader?
Whew, that's a tough one. I don't know if I can pick just one guy. I
You
think
can pick a few. That's cool.
I think the starting pitchers really have a chance to set. I mean, it's not just because it's the postseason, but the starting pitchers really have a chance to set the tone and go deep into games and really, really make it difficult for the opponents to climb back into games, especially whenever they know that they're going against such a tough offense, and then also such a reliable defense too. They're Arkansas is not going to be a defense where all you got to do is just keep putting it in play, and eventually they're going to crack. They just don't a lot of times. They're just that consistent on that side of the ball. So, I think if the starting pitchers are able to go out there, go deep into games, and limit the amount of runs that are given up, that Arkansas is going to be in a really good spot in the majority of their games.
Curious to ask you a little bit about the regional itself. I don't know how much background knowledge you've done, but North Dakota State, Kansas, Creighton, all coming to town. Is there one of those 3 teams that you're most nervous about if you're the Razorbacks?
I've only very briefly looked at it. You can't overlook anybody,
Mm-hmm.
especially at this level. If you're good enough to play in a regional and Division I baseball, you can't afford to overlook anybody because it can happen that fast. Especially with teams like that maybe didn't start out as good and got hot at the right times, as teams we've mentioned before, because that can happen. That can happen really quickly. Based on what I've read and heard, Kansas is having a phenomenal year. They've got a couple of guys that I believe were in the locker room when I were there. Michael Brooks. I think there's another one that they mentioned, but I remember Brooks, and he's a good dude and a good player. So, I think any of those 3 teams can sneak up on you if you're not careful. But I know that for sure Kansas is having a great year.
Yeah, they just lost in the Big 12 semifinal to TCU, a team that we kind of mentioned a little earlier on. And then, like I said, you've got Creighton, Big East champs, and North Dakota State, who they won their division. Who knows what that team's going to look like because they've had some really low lows. But curious, let's talk about the fan base. Let's talk about the atmosphere. When you were in your first postseason game and you got to look around, I know we touched on it a little bit, but how big of a difference is that Baumwalker atmosphere, especially when it gets to that first weekend in June?
Oh, it's just you almost can't even really put it into words in a number of ways. It's just the feeling's different, the atmosphere is different. It's it's just a little bit louder than usual, but then whenever it really when things really go in the right direction, it gets incredibly loud, even louder than you know typical situations in the regular season. And like I said, whenever that occurs and you're on the other side of it, it speeds you up really quickly. Heart rate gets going fast, and all of a sudden you don't really you're not in as much control as you were a minute ago. And it you have to really work hard to slow the game down, take deep breaths, and not let that snowball on you, because it will very quickly. And fortunately, Arkansas is on the winning side of that for being able to host.
Before we get your predictions and we let you go from the show, do you have a favorite postseason moment of yours that you always love to look back to when it's this time of year?
Oh man, that's a tough one. There's some fun ones. I of course when Welch hit the home run against Nebraska, that was about as hyped as I've ever been in a dugout. And um, man, I can't. I don't know if I can just place it on one single thing, but I know when we dogpiled to go to Omaha in 2019, that was one of the pinnacles of my entire playing career. And it there's so many of them. It's hard to put one.
I mean, I could sit here and listen to all of them. I'm sure Hog fans at home could sit here and listen to all of them. But Matt, before we wrap up with you, we'll ask about your prediction in just a second. But I love asking this question: for this Arkansas team to get to Omaha, X has to happen. Fill in the blank is my question. What is X?
They're gonna have to hit. They're gonna have to hit. I think they will. That's my prediction. I predict that they're gonna have to hit and that they will hit in order to get to Omaha. So I guess that kind of slippery slope into my final prediction. I think this is the team that makes it to Omaha, and I would love to see. Obviously, would love to see Coach Van Horn win his first natty.
Do you like the super regional pairing that they've paired Arkansas with Tennessee, or you can't really focus on that? But we can, because we're doing a fun interview. You're not on the team anymore. So do you like that they've paired Dave? If he wants to get his first national championship, he's got to get past Tony V. Do you like that? Do you not like that? Where do you stand on that?
Yeah, I mean, it is what it is. It has the potential because of the history. I think it has the potential to be really emotional. I mean, it's going to be emotional anyways, but because of how they kind of set it up, I think it has the potential to be even extraordinarily emotional. But at the end of the day, it's kind of the same thing. It's one team against another, and the team that scores the most runs in a 3-game series is going to move on. And I think that if you primarily focus on that, that's where that's the winning team. That's
Matt,
how it's going to work.
I love that. Here we go. Let's get your prediction before we let you go, because I've had you for a little bit of time. What is your prediction? Where does this Arkansas team go? I know you feel this in already. Do you got them just going to Omaha, or you got them lifting the trophy and saying this is the team?
In terms of depth and top to bottom, I think this is one of, if not the best team that's come through in the last 30 years. I think if any team's going to do it, this team has the potential to do it. And that's not to poo in the face of any of the teams that I played on or any of the teams that were before me or anything like that. You just have to tip your cap to the amount of talent and what this team is capable of doing, because I still don't think we've seen the best.
I love that. And you always want to get hot around this time. This Arkansas team, they're clicking at the right moment. Matt Goodheart, thank you so much for joining the show. We'll have more rubber match on the other side of the break. Stick around. We'll be right back. All right, I hope you all enjoyed that interview as much as I did with Matt. What a fun person to sit down with and talk to. He's got all the experience you need. Let's talk about the bracket. I'm going to pull it up right now. I know it's a little small, but I'm just going to run through a couple of the regions that I really like and some of the matchups I think you keep an eye on. If I had to pick my favorite region, I also broke all this down on TikTok. If people are on TikTok who watch this from YouTube, I don't know if that's the right generation here, but whatever. You can go see all of this on TikTok as well. I think I've got to go my favorite regional that's been announced has to be the Corvallis Regional. You've got Oklahoma, Oregon State, St. Mary's, USC and TCU. This is really interesting because Oregon State, they are not in a conference right now, but they're still 8 in the country. And what's really intriguing about this is I think it's that TCU-USC matchup. USC did pretty well in the Big Ten this year. They obviously made the tournament. And TCU, another one of those teams that they're just hot. We saw them back in 2023 come here to Fayetteville. Trey Richardson dominated Arkansas's pitching staff that year. They went all the way to Omaha. So I think maybe Kirk Saarloos might be able to do it again, potentially. So this is, I think, my favorite regional out of them all as we kind of look around. The one team I think that got screwed the most in regionals and in the NCAA tournament has to be Georgia Tech. They won the ACC regular season. It's their head coach's final year, and they get paired with the hottest team in the SEC in Ole Miss. They're playing in Oxford, so that's going to be a lot of lightning and excitement happening there. I think that's really good, but let's talk about this. I know I asked Matt about having Tennessee playing the super matchup with Arkansas. Again, if you're the Hogs and you're Hog fans, you shouldn't be that worried about it. You just took 2 or 3 from Tennessee 2 weeks ago. And look, the team that they beat in the SEC tournament in Vanderbilt, or excuse me, they didn't beat Vanderbilt. They lost to Vanderbilt. They beat Texas. Texas is sputtering. I don't love Texas's too. I actually like K-State coming out of the Austin Regional. But if you look at the Tennessee series, that told you everything you wanted to know. You beat Phillips. You didn't beat Phillips. Then you beat Liam Doyle. I like the Hogs right now. And let's be real. Tennessee got boat raced by Vanderbilt. Let's not freak out. This isn't a Tennessee team that's coming in super hot. They're coming in off of a 10-0 loss to Vandy in the SEC tournament. Some of the other things that really stuck out to me in the tournament is you've got Florida down here. This should be really fun. They're kind of paired up, it looks like, with that East Carolina region. That should be, and Coastal Carolina and East Carolina and Florida. That's a fun one. As well as, again, you've got this like weird, funky Tallahassee region where every single one of them wear one of the same color, where it's like all maroon. So that's another really fun region. But overall, it's just a great time of the year. College baseball is here. As for my national champion, I've sat on this a couple of days. I've thought about it. I don't think I want to say Arkansas because I think all of the viewers out there might not like me for doing it, but I can't talk myself into another team. I think LSU might be able to do it again. I don't think Vanderbilt necessarily has the hitting to be able to do it. If you're looking at those top tier SEC teams right now, can their bats be consistent enough? I kind of like North Carolina a little bit. I think they could have a chance to break through and do some damage. But the more I think about it, I don't want to say Arkansas, but I think I'm going to say Arkansas. Don't kill me at home. I think I've got the Hogs as my national champs. I don't like that. All right, maybe I'll change it later today. If you catch me tweeting out my bracket in my Omaha 8, let me know. Let me know what you think. As always, big thanks to Matt Goodheart for joining the show, and thanks to all of you for watching this whole entire season. It has been such a blast. We're only getting started on the rubber match. I'll have at least one more episode out next week to either recap or we'll preview Super Regionals. Hopefully, we're doing this till the end of June. But that's going to do it for this episode of the Rubber Match. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you guys back here next week.